Welcome to the peaceful village of Mararati, where two brothers, Mosi and Juma, lived a simple yet joyful life. Raised by their beloved grandmother, they grew up dreaming of a future where they could rule the land like kings, especially when their hearts were captivated by Naisha, the beautiful girl from the prestigious family. Their days were filled with laughter and light-hearted banter, imagining grand lives far beyond the humble chores they performed. But one ordinary afternoon, as the brothers set out to fetch water from the river, fate had other plans for them. What began as a playful journey would soon lead them down a path neither could have predicted. A path filled with ancient magic, time-bending mysteries, and a race for survival. What they find at the river's edge will change their lives forever, and the world they once knew will never be the same. One sunny afternoon, Mosi and Juma set off to fetch water from the flowing river near the ancient waterfall. As they walked, they joked about their future, Mosi laughingly suggesting, "If I were king, Naisha would be my queen, and I would never fetch water again." Juma laughed too, though his feelings for Naisha ran deeper than Mosi's playful banter. As they reached the river, Mosi, being the lazier of the two, proposed a deal. "Why don't you fill the jerry cans, and I'll let you approach Naisha first? It's only fair since I'm such a generous brother." Juma, always the hard-working one, agreed and began filling the jerry cans without hesitation. While fetching water, Juma noticed something unusual in the river. It was a strange root, shaped like a wreath, floating near the surface. Curious, he picked it up and tied it around his waist, thinking nothing of it. Once the jerry cans were filled, they loaded them onto the cart pulled by their donkeys and set off back to the village. As they traveled, Mosi noticed the wreath around Juma's waist and couldn't resist teasing him. "What's that supposed to be? Your royal crown?" he joked, reaching out to touch it. The moment Mosi's hand touched the wreath, everything around them changed. The peaceful sounds of the village faded, replaced by the thunderous roar of hooves and the rumbling of chariot wheels. In the blink of an eye, they found themselves riding a chariot, racing through the wilderness. Behind them, soldiers on horseback were giving chase, shouting orders to capture them. To their shock, a young woman lay sleeping under the chariot, none other than a princess. Mosi, bewildered, clutched the reins beside Juma, who seemed far more composed in this strange scene. The chariot hit a bump, causing the princess to stir. As the brothers tried to regain control of the chariot, it suddenly broke down, tossing them to the ground. Before they could fully comprehend what had happened, the soldiers caught up to them and quickly apprehended them. They were dragged to the palace, accused of fleeing with the king's daughter. Mosi, still in disbelief, struggled to remember what had led to this, while Juma remained calm, as if he understood exactly what was going on. As they were brought before the king, Mosi turned to his brother, wide-eyed. "What's going on? How did we end up here?" But Juma, now fully immersed in the scene, responded with a knowing smile. "It seems, brother, we have truly traveled back in time. And now we must face the consequences." The brothers stood in front of the king, the princess now awake and beside him, her eyes filled with curiosity and confusion. The king's voice boomed as he demanded an explanation for their daring escape with the princess. Mosi, at a loss for words, looked to Juma for answers, while Juma prepared to navigate this unfamiliar but strangely familiar world. The ancient world had claimed them, and their journey was only just beginning. As the charges were read, the courtroom of the palace fell into tense silence. Juma, standing tall, was accused of aiding his brother Mosi in escaping with the princess, the only heir to the kingdom. Before Juma could even defend himself, the large wooden doors of the hall burst open, and General Nasavati stormed in, his imposing presence drawing everyone's attention. His son trailed behind him, both wearing expressions of anger and triumph. "You idiots!" General Masavati roared, his voice echoing through the stone walls. "You think you can run with my son's bride-to-be? Soldiers, take them to the cells. No food or water for these traitors." The power of the general's command silenced the room, and despite the lack of a formal trial, the guards swiftly obeyed. Mosi and Juma were dragged away, their protests falling on deaf ears. The king, who was known for his just and kind rule, remained silent, watching the scene unfold with a pensive expression. As the prisoners were taken to the cells, Masavati approached the king's dais, only to be stopped by the royal bodyguards. The king, calm and composed, gestured for the guards to step aside, allowing the general to speak. "Your Majesty," Masavati began, his voice laced with disdain. "How can the son of a peasant, a nobody, marry the future queen of this land? Is this how you plan to leave the kingdom? In the hands of a worthless man? My son is a warrior, a leader, fit to rule. Mosi's parents are mere peasants working in your gardens, and now he dares to dream of ruling alongside your daughter?" The king remained quiet, his gaze steady. Without a word, he took his daughter, who had been sitting beside him, by the hand and led her into the palace, leaving the general fuming in the courtyard. Days passed, and the king noticed a change in his daughter. She seemed distant, her laughter absent, her eyes filled with sorrow. Concerned, the king finally approached her. "What troubles you, my dear?" he asked gently. The princess, no longer able to keep her feelings hidden, confessed, "Father, I love Mosi. I always have. It is not the throne or status that matters to me. It is him." The king, seeing the sincerity in his daughter's eyes, felt the weight of her words. Though he had never expected such a match, he respected her feelings and made a decision. He called for an announcement to be made. The wedding between Mosi and the princess would proceed as planned. But unbeknownst to the king, this decision had been made before Mosi and Juma were captured. The wicked General Masavati, infuriated by the king's acceptance of Mosi, had already put a dark plan into motion. He had sought the help of powerful magicians, weaving a plot to send Mosi, Juma, and Naisha to another time, away from his grasp and far from the kingdom. Masavati knew that the princess held the knowledge of the palace vault's secret combination, a treasure he coveted for his own. On the day of the wedding, as Mosi and Juma were being prepared for their new roles, Mosi as the future king and Juma as his trusted bodyguard, an ancient spell was cast. The magicians, working with the general, manipulated the powers of the land, drawing on a legendary convergence of time that occurred once every 2,000 years. The spell, designed to banish Mosi and Juma to an unknown era, took hold of them. But in a twist of fate, Naisha was also caught in the magical rift. In an instant, the three of them were teleported through time, transported from their ancient kingdom to the future. They were found as infants on the main road near Mararati village, where a kind old woman, now their grandmother, took them in and raised them. Unbeknownst to her, these children had once been royalty and nobles, caught in the web of time. The following day, Waridi and her husband Kaziku, who had longed for a child of their own, came across a crying baby girl in the forest. The girl, unaware of her past identity, was named Isha, but over time, the couple unknowingly changed her name to Naisha. No one in the village knew the true origins of Mosi, Juma, or Naisha. Their parents had hidden them in the forest during a violent raid, hoping to save them from their pursuers. And thus, their existence in this new time had begun. Pause, please. Are you enjoying listening to the story? Subscribe, please. Let's continue telling our story. The wicked General Masavati's plot had misfired. His intent was to harm Mosi and Juma while sparing Naisha, but the spell shifted them all to different futures. Their lives had been set on a new course, separated from their kingdom, their pasts forgotten. The ancient legend of the time-traveling convergence, once considered a myth, had proven real. Every 2,000 years, the power of the convergence allowed time to bend. No one in Mararati believed the old stories, and neither had Mosi and Juma. But when Mosi joked about being king and Juma tied the wreath around his waist, they had unknowingly triggered the events that sent them back in time. Now, as they had once again touched the wreath, their memories of the past came flooding back. Mosi and Juma realized that they had been pursued because of their connection to Naisha, who held the key to the palace's most valuable secret. And now, in their return to the ancient time, they were once again thrust into the chaos of a kingdom that had long since fallen into turmoil. The king was gone, the kingdom in disarray, and General Masavati still lurked, hungry for power. The brothers would have to navigate this dangerous world, reclaim their rightful places, and protect Naisha, who held the fate of the kingdom in her hands. The journey that had started with a simple trip to fetch water had now become a race against time itself. As Mosi and Juma sat in the dark, cold cell, the reality of their predicament began to weigh heavily on them. For the second time, they found themselves imprisoned, and this time the king wasn't there to intervene. Days passed in near silence until one fateful day, a familiar voice echoed through the dungeon. It was Mustafa, their childhood friend. Mustafa had also been thrown into the cell for defying General Masavati, who demanded 2 of his cows to fund his propaganda campaign. Leaning against the cold wall, Mustafa whispered to Mosi, "Brother, the general plans something more sinister than we realize. He doesn't just want power, he wants to control time itself. He's using dark magic to pull Naisha back from the future and trap her in the past. But to do that, he needs both of you." Mosi's eyes widened as the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. His memory slowly returned, triggered by Mustafa's words. He remembered the time they had first touched the wreath by the river and how that moment had transported them to this chaotic timeline. Now, the general was intent on ensuring that Mosi and Juma would not return to their normal lives, nor would they reach the river again. Masavati's plan was to manipulate time, making Naisha fall in love with Mosi, then capturing them both and dragging them back into the past. But the general's use of the ancient time magic was limited. Mustafa explained that according to the wise men, a person could only use time-shifting powers 3 times before being trapped in one timeline. Mosi and Juma, however, were unintentional users of the magic, which meant the rules didn't fully apply to them. They still had hope, if they could figure out how to break the cycle. The very next morning, Mosi and Juma were forcibly taken from their cell and led into a dark chamber, where the ancient time-traveling clock was housed. General Masavati was there, his eyes gleaming with triumph. He knew this was his moment. As the clock began to tick, its hands moving in eerie synchronization, the room filled with a strange energy. In a matter of minutes, Mosi and Juma found themselves spinning through time once more. They fell hard into a ditch, their cart crashing beside them. Dazed, they struggled to their feet. As the dust cleared, they were greeted by a sharp voice. "Stop playing while riding the cart. You will harm yourselves, my children." It was their grandmother, standing there with her hands on her hips, scolding them as if nothing unusual had happened. Mosi and Juma exchanged confused glances. They were back in their village, but something wasn't right. Everything felt oddly familiar. As they looked around, their eyes widened in disbelief. Among the villagers, they saw Mustafa, not as the grown man they had known, but as a boy riding a bicycle. Their cart had hit him, causing him to fall. "Mustafa?" Juma muttered under his breath. The situation grew even more bizarre when they spotted General Masavati standing among the villagers. The general, dressed in the garb of a traveler, claimed he was from a distant village and was merely looking for his lost sheep. As if things couldn't get any stranger, Naisha appeared. She was carrying firewood, walking with her mother. The moment Mosi saw her, he instinctively looked away, his face flushing with shyness. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew this Naisha. It was the same girl he had loved in both the past and the future, but now she stood before him as if time had looped back to a familiar point. Everything felt off. It was as if they had been thrown into a different version of their lives. A timeline where the people they knew were younger, and yet their memories remained intact. But the most unsettling part of all was General Masavati's presence. His intentions were clear: to ensure that Mosi and Juma would never reach the river again and touch the magical wreath, for that was the only way they could break free from the twisted time loop. The two brothers, now fully aware of the stakes, realized that this was not just a matter of love or destiny. They had to find a way to protect Naisha and escape the general's trap. But the magic that bound them was ancient and powerful. With each passing moment, the danger grew, and Mosi, still shy but determined, knew that this time he had to act. As the sun began to set over the village of Mararati, the two brothers stood at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. Their journey to uncover the truth about their past, their connection to Naisha, and the dark forces manipulating time itself had only just begun. They had to make a choice: face the uncertainty of their tangled timelines, or confront General Masavati head-on to break the curse once and for all. But by this happening, the ancient kingdom, are they going back again? This, they had to think about it. Should they tell the villagers about this, or they keep quiet for this time? Mosi and Juma sat on the edge of the ditch, dirt on their clothes and confusion swirling in their minds. They could hardly believe what was happening. The stories they once joked about, time travel, becoming kings, and saving kingdoms, were suddenly unfolding before their eyes. Their childhood dreams and fairy tales had become a bizarre reality. And now they were thrust into a situation far more dangerous than they ever imagined. As they watched Mustafa ride away on his bicycle and General Masavati fade into the crowd, the weight of their responsibility started to sink in. They weren't just two village boys fetching water anymore. They had to save a kingdom, stop an evil general, and somehow, Mosi had to find a way to be with Naisha, the girl he had loved across time. That night, as they sat by the fire, their grandmother, still oblivious to their adventure, hummed a song from her youth. Mosi stared into the flames, his mind racing. "Juma," he whispered, breaking the silence. "What if this isn't a dream? What if everything we thought was a fairy tale is actually real? We've been sent back to the past, but now it feels like we're stuck between two lives." Juma nodded. He had always been the more level-headed of the two. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that they were at the center of something much larger than themselves. "We have to figure this out, Mosi. If what Mustafa said is true, General Masavati is planning something terrible. He's using magic to manipulate time, and he's after Naisha. If we don't stop him, he'll take control of the kingdom. But how do we stop him?" Mosi asked, his voice tinged with fear. "We're just two boys. We don't have an army. We don't even know how to fight." Juma's face hardened with determination. "We may not have an army, but we have each other. And we have Naisha. Together, we can figure this out. We have to." The next morning, Mosi and Juma set out on their journey to uncover the truth behind the time magic. They knew that their first step was finding Naisha, but as they walked through the village, they felt a strange energy in the air. The villagers, who had once been familiar faces, now seemed distant, as if they were stuck in a time loop of their own. People moved slowly, almost as if they were unaware of the passage of time. Finally, they found Naisha by the river, washing clothes with her mother. Mosi's heart raced as he approached her. He couldn't help but feel nervous, but when their eyes met, a spark of recognition passed between them. Naisha, Mosi whispered, do you remember anything strange? Do you remember us? The wreath by the river? Naisha looked at him, her brows furrowed in confusion. I don't understand, Mosi. What are you talking about? Before Mosi could explain, Juma stepped forward. Naisha, we don't have much time. General Masavati is after you. He's using magic to trap us all in different timelines. We've traveled through time before, and now we're back to stop him. Naisha's eyes widened, and she took a step back. You're scaring me. This is impossible. Time travel? Magic? How could that be real? Are you crazy? Mosi gently took her hand. I know it sounds crazy, but you have to trust us. We don't fully understand it either. But we've seen the future. We were captured for helping you escape. You are the princes. And General Masavati is planning to use that same magic to drag us all back to the past. For a moment, Naisha hesitated, but something deep inside her told her that Mosi was telling the truth. She had always felt a connection to him, and now that feeling was stronger than ever. Okay, she said quietly. I'll help, but what do we do? The three of them decided to visit the ancient wise man who lived at the edge of the village. He was rumored to know the secrets of time and magic. As they approached his hut, the old man greeted them with a knowing smile. Ah, I've been expecting you, he said, his voice raspy but full of wisdom. The convergence of time has come once again. The general seeks to rule both past and future, but he is not the master of time. You are. What do you mean? Mosi asked, bewildered. The wise man pointed to the wreath still tied around Juma's waist. That wreath is a symbol of your connection to time itself. You are not bound by the same rules as the general. You can stop him, but only if you act quickly. You must return to the river during the next full moon and cast the wreath into the water. It will close the time loop and prevent the general from trapping you. But be warned, once the loop is closed, you will never be able to travel through time again. Mosi and Juma exchanged nervous glances. This was their only chance to stop the general and save the kingdom. But it also meant that Mosi and Naisha would be stuck in whatever timeline they were in once the loop was closed. As the full moon rose, the three friends stood by the river, the sound of the waterfall echoing in the distance. General Masavati, having discovered their plan, appeared with his army from the past, determined to stop them. You fools, he roared. You cannot defy the power of time. I will rule this kingdom, and you will be nothing but shadows of the past. Juma, always the brave one, stepped forward. No, General, time does not belong to you. It belongs to us, and we choose to protect it. With that, he tossed the wreath into the river. The water shimmered with a blinding light as the magic was unleashed. Time itself seemed to tremble, and for a moment everything stood still. Mosi reached for Naisha's hand. Whatever happens, I'm glad I found you, he whispered. The light engulfed them all, and when it finally faded, the general was gone, trapped in a time of his own making. The village was safe, and the kingdom was restored. Mosi, Juma, and Naisha were back in their own time, standing by the river as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. Mosi looked at Naisha, who smiled at him warmly. I think I've always known, she said softly. I was always meant to be with you. And so, with the kingdom saved and their adventure over, Mosi and Naisha walked hand in hand back to the village, where their future, together, awaited. Juma, ever the loyal brother, walked beside them, knowing that they had not only saved the kingdom, but had also found their place in time. As they walked through the familiar paths of their village, a strange energy hummed in the air, whispering secrets of time that had yet to be unveiled. Mosi felt a flicker of something deeper stirring within him, a connection to the past that bound him to Naisha in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. Suddenly, Naisha halted, her gaze fixed on a spot near the riverbank where the light from the moon danced upon the water's surface. "What if this isn't the end? What if our journey has just begun?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Mosi exchanged a glance with Juma. "You mean the wreath? The magic could still hold more secrets?" he replied, feeling a sense of urgency igniting within him. Driven by a newfound determination, they made their way back to the waterfall, where it all began. Each step echoed with the memories of their shared past, the moments spent under the sun, the laughter, and the silent promises made beneath the shade of the baobab tree. As they reached the waterfall, the sound of rushing water filled their ears, soothing yet powerful. There, half buried in the riverbank, they noticed a small, ancient tablet, its surface covered in symbols that felt strangely familiar. Juma knelt down, his fingers brushing against the intricate carvings. "Do you feel that?" he asked, glancing up at his brother and Naisha. "It's like it's calling to us." Mosi stepped closer, an electric energy thrumming through the air. "What if it holds the key to understanding everything we've been through?" With a shared nod of determination, they gathered around the tablet. As Juma lifted it from the ground, the symbols began to glow, resonating with the magic that had once engulfed them. The waterfall's roar grew louder, and before they could react, the world around them trembled and shifted once more. Suddenly, they found themselves transported to an ancient stone chamber, lit by flickering torches. At the center stood an altar adorned with a golden crown and a scepter, symbols of a forgotten kingdom, long lost to time. Mosi, Juma, and Naisha exchanged incredulous glances, realization dawning upon them. They had uncovered the lost kingdom their past selves had once ruled, and the final piece of their journey had begun. Time had brought them here, and now it was their duty to reclaim their true legacy. The echoes of General Masavati's laughter lingered in their minds, a chilling reminder that their battle was far from over. They were not merely trying to save a kingdom, they were meant to restore a legacy, one that bound them across time and destiny. As they prepared to step forward and claim their rightful place, Mosi squeezed Naisha's hand, a silent promise that they would face whatever trials lay ahead together. As the shadows of the past started to fade into the mist, Naisha's thoughts drifted to a time long ago when her father, the wise and aging king, had sought counsel on securing the future of their kingdom. With the weight of the crown heavy upon his head, he needed a husband for his daughter, someone who could lead the kingdom with both strength and compassion. Someone he could trust to protect his legacy. In those days, Naisha, even before she met Mosi, was already carrying out her royal duties with grace and determination. One fateful day, as she supervised the workers in the fields, she saw a humble farm steward named Mosi risk his life to save a donkey that had fallen from a steep cliff. Without asking for reward or recognition, Mosi had simply bowed before and continued his work with silent dignity, never once seeking her favor. Days passed, and Mosi's silent resilience, hard work, and strong sense of duty did not go unnoticed. On another occasion, while Naisha and Juma rode through the plantation, their horse had suddenly bolted, disappearing into the thick greenery. But Mosi, with unwavering focus, chased after the runaway horse, returning it to Naisha and Juma with a calm smile. It was in that moment that something stirred in Naisha's heart, a quiet admiration that grew each time she saw him. Juma too saw Mosi's quiet strength, his integrity, and his sense of responsibility. And together, Naisha and Juma began to realize that perhaps the future of the kingdom lay not in riches or nobility, but in the heart of a simple man, a man who was just and good and who asked for nothing in return. The king, in his wisdom, had already seen this, and soon after, he entrusted Mosi with the most important role in the kingdom, the responsibility of overseeing all operations. Mosi's fair and just leadership earned him the respect of everyone, from the highest noble to the lowest laborer. But beneath this rising admiration, another question loomed. Would the king's decision to entitle Mosi with such power change the course of Naisha's future forever? And as time slowly bent and twisted around them, what secrets from the past would resurface to challenge the bond that was beginning to form between them? As the curtain closes on this chapter, Naisha, Juma, and Mosi find themselves caught in a web of fate, where duty and love, destiny and time are all intertwined. But with the power of the wreath still lingering, and the echoes of General Masavati's dark magic not yet fully silenced, their journey is far from over. What trials await them in the next chapter? And will Mosi's newfound role as leader of the kingdom solidify his place beside Naisha, or tear them apart before their love can truly begin? The answer lies in what happens next, and the fate of the kingdom may depend on it. All these mysteries and more will unfold in part 2 of this story. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we upload the next chapter. While we wait for part 2, take a moment to check out our previous videos. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. And tell a friend to subscribe.